Hey, it's Alan here.
And Bree. And
And
we
we
are
are
the
the
hunter
hunter
and the
and the
hippie.
Connected through yoga and bonded by our love of the wild places and the love for outdoors, we've come together to share our conversations about life.
Well, maybe more so what we've learned or are continuing to learn about life.
And there's no one way to do it. Life, that is.
And hopefully provide you with some teeny tiny bits of inspiration to connect deeper with yourself, others, and our great Mother Earth.
All right. Enough already about the podcast. Let's just get to the podcast. Hey, Bree.
Good morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah. Life is solid. Like I think we talked last time about this season is like slowing down, and it's I've had a lot more time for things that were put on the back burner, so that's been nice.
Yeah. Isn't that nice? Like getting the opportunity to slow down.
Yeah.
I talked about this in my yoga class. It's so weird, right? Like the universe works in such weird ways. Right? Like you're bringing this up, and I talked about in my yoga class last night that finding the stillness, right? Like being appreciative of the stillness. What do you find in the stillness? And there's a lot to that talk, and there's a lot to the stillness. But at the end of the class, one of my students was like, "Oh my God, my number one thing on my gratitude list this morning was stillness." And it's just something we often don't notice, right? Unless you're mindful of it. And now you're right. Like the slowdown, it's great, right? The slowdown isn't the stillness, but it's starting to be mindful of, fuck, I'm going too hard, too fast, too much. And it's all things that we bring into our lives, but it's nice to appreciate. And I'm the same way. Like I'm starting to slow down, and hunting seasons have come to an end, and it's definitely a bit calmer here, so I can appreciate that.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about this in past episodes, but when I slow down and have more of those pauses, like creativity starts to flourish. And that's really been cool because I haven't been writing as much as other periods or other seasons of life. And just the last few days, there's just so much that's been kind of arising. And I just, whether it's in my morning sadhana or before going to bed, and I've just like had my journal nearby, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to write this out. And it's just really flowing. So capitalizing on that too, and saying, oh, I'm giving myself this space that is surfacing. Let me be with that. Let me play to it. And I think that's so often we kind of force ourselves into phases, right? And you can create habit, right? Like how obviously you can establish habits. Like if I wanted to write more consistently, I could every day at 7 a.m. like force myself to write, and that's great. And there's a place for that. I also think there's a place for playing to like being in the flow, right? So playing to your strengths. If you're trying to be a morning person but you're like most productive at night, I don't know if it makes sense for you to force yourself to wake up at 4 a.m.
Right.
You know? So, it's been neat just to be like, oh, it's here. It just, maybe it needed some stillness and needed some pauses to come up. And I think, last episode I mentioned, I said, I'm not doing any, like I wasn't going to do any workshops or anything until next year. And it was like this creation period, and it's been really nice to kind of see that intention of moving into slowing down and creating, and actual creativity and creation is arising. So,
Yeah. We were just talking about before we started recording, what we wanted to talk about, and I feel like we've already jumped into it. Right, like I believe these are the boundaries that we set for ourselves. And I think, and we can get into this as deep as we want, but, boundaries are critical in life. And I think that they're ever changing, right? And we get to control them. And there are boundaries that, we set externally, but then there's also boundaries we set for ourselves. Right. And you set that boundary of no more workshops, right? Retreats until next year. Right. And that's a boundary. And now it's giving you more time for something else, to be creative. And I feel the same. So I was doing, I was doing 75 hard, and then I jumped into phase 1 of the Live Hard program. And one of the things that you have to do in that program is there's 3 critical tasks, and you get to make them up. And it's just something that propels your life forward. And one of the 3 critical tasks I chose was to post on social media every day, which is really hard at first. But then, like you're saying, like you create that habit, and the creative juices get flowing. And while I write in my journal daily, I was thinking of things like I had this boundary of something that I had to do, and it allowed me, as like I'm going through my day, to be like creative ideas were just started coming to mind, and things I wanted to write about, and I would have to grab my phone, right? So a lot of my note taking and stuff has been in my phone recently, because right, like I'm driving, and like I'll use the voice to text, or or like quick, I'll grab my phone and throw a note in there, and sometimes it's really terrible because I'll put in like 2 words thinking I'll remember. Right? Again, that's the biggest fucking lie we tell ourselves. You will not remember, I promise you.
If it's really important, it will come back though.
Sure, but write it down. Right, like get it down, get the full thought out. Right, try not to use single words. But yeah, so it's been wild, how productive, 75 hard, and there's a whole episode coming out on that, or that's out on that already, possibly. But it's interesting, right? Like these boundaries that we set for ourselves, and how they impact our lives. And
so my question would be is how do you define boundaries? Like what would you, because I've been this whole week especially, and it's come up multiple times, of like I have this resistance to the concept of boundaries. And so this week has been this kind of epiphany or just revelation around it. But before I go into that, I want to know, like, how do you, what do you call, what is a boundary? Like, what do you call it? Is it like in your perspective?
That's a great question. I don't know. I might have to.
Or why do you have to set boundaries?
Well, for a few reasons. One, I set boundaries because it's healthy, right? It's healthy for my external relationships. So I am not at anyone's beck and call, right? And I used to be, right? Before I've developed, right? Like before I had tools like yoga and meditation, and I saw what I wanted in life. When you don't have any boundaries, right? Anyone can essentially, right? Like come into your country, right? And claim their stake of land and claim their stake of property. And for that alone, like, this is, like my time in the morning is my time in the morning. That's a boundary, right? Nothing, no one interrupts that. But I also believe, right, our boundaries are like ever changing and flexible. It's funny, like when I think of it like this, like, these like not this like hard line fence, but more of like this like aura bubble. Here I go getting all hippie on us, right? Of like this like living, breathing, like pulsating, this, right? Like this thing that, because you can't be so rigid that you break. You know, when I talk my students through tree pose, or really, you know, any balance pose, it's specifically tree pose, right? Like, you know, there's wobbles that come with tree pose, and I tell them embrace the wobbles, right? Don't fight it, right? Rigidity is what makes you fall over. And when you embrace the wobbles, right? When you embrace the flow, right? The tree that blows with the wind is the tree that stays standing. It's the one that doesn't have the deep roots, right? You can have the deep roots and still blow with the wind, right? It's those ones that have the shallow roots and then the rigidity, and they just fall over, right? So you can be rooted in your beliefs and rooted in what you need in life, and then still blow with the wind, right? So you don't break. And for me, like, that's important in my mental health. You know, I've been really, I love the word, and I love being selfish, and people like cringe at that. And I've been trying to change the connotation of selfish, especially in my yoga classes, because we have to be selfish. We have to take care of ourselves first. We have to be selfish in order to be selfless. And we have to fill our cups. And in order to do that, right, like, you can't pour from your cup if there's nothing in it. And in order to do that, you have to have boundaries. And I have no problem. Like, I absolutely call them boundaries. So, you know, maybe, I don't know if you call them something different, or like, do you like the word boundary? Do you not like the word boundary?
I don't. What I realize is, personally, like, my perspective on it, what I kind of started to write about this week is, I feel like when we have to set boundaries when we don't feel whole and complete. When we're whole and complete, we act from our higher self, right? We act from this self-serving spot. And so I think what happens is we get so much guilt or shame about having to say no to someone, or there's a level of our, like, when we don't feel whole, our wholeness comes externally, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like we let people, what we're calling, cross your boundaries, because we're worried about if they're going to like me, if it's approved, if this is, you know, acknowledged, all these different things, right? And so what I see it as is we're just not acting, you know, we're filling that wholeness in a different way. And so I feel that when you remember that you're whole and complete, you get to act from a place that's self-serving. And so then there's not the other components that go with it, guilt or shame or like feeling bad. You just get to say it or do whatever it is unapologetically. And it's not from a place of, I'm going to hurt this person too, you know, like I think, and maybe the part of that is like boundaries feels like walls, and I don't, and then that feels like resistance. And so much of just what I focus on is like, let's release resistance to what is. And so that's kind of been my thoughts about it. 'Cause I'm like, I don't like these boundaries. It's like, I'm going to put these up and no one's going to cross it. And it's because I'm like, well, because I'm not comfortable serving myself. And so if I say I'm setting boundaries, then it's okay, because, oh no, this is crossing a boundary. But like you said, the boundaries waver, they change. And that's where I see it is like, why are some days it's okay for this person to cross this, like for you to say yes to this, and some days it's not okay. And it's simply, you know, boundaries just, and that's why I was like, what does that mean for you? What does that look like? And boundaries aren't set typically. I think a lot of times personal boundaries, that there is that wavering. And so I look at it as, if we can just come back to like remembering we're whole and complete always, and come from our highest good, like that self-serving place, then we don't have to create boundaries. And like the other piece you talked about, like that filling your own cup, like you can't give from a cup that's not full is, I think we have established this idea of strong and independent and I don't need anyone. And so it's that idea of self-care. Like that's another one I've been kind of playing around with.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, maybe if we just allowed other people to care for us as well, we wouldn't need so much self-care. If we stop being so independent and strong and I can do this on my own, and we let other people nurture us, like we have such a hard time receiving from people.
Absolutely.
You know, and like asking for help and it's like, what happened if we just opened ourselves to that? We can fill our own cup, but we can allow other people to fill our cup too.
Absolutely agree. I agree with that part, but I disagree with some of that too as well. Right? Like it's our job to take care of ourselves, right? You can't care more about me than I do. Right? So, I agree in the sense of like it takes a village, right? Like that's my thing. Like it takes a village, right? Like we should be filling each other up. We should be sharing and building each other up and helping each other. But we should also be focused on, right? And we can't do it alone, right? Like the self-made shit. I don't know if I've ever said this on the podcast, but there's no such thing as self-made, right? No one does this alone. No one, absolutely no one. Right? Like you'd be living in a vacuum if that was the case. And so I agree with that aspect of it, but I think that, you know, there's also the no one's coming to save us aspect of, right? Like you need to fill up you need to take care of yourself. And some days you're not going to be able to. And that's where like the people, but when it comes down to, you know, because if you were to strictly rely on other people filling your cup constantly, you wouldn't have people to fill your cup because people get over that real quick, right? If you're constantly draining other people from their energy of what they need, and
you're saying that you're saying someone else filling your cup means you're draining their cup, and that's not necessarily true.
If they just give and you're not giving in return, right? They don't get anything from that.
I don't agree with that because I don't give to get.
Neither do I. But the more you give, the more you're going to get.
The give. Yeah, but if you do it with the expectation.
Right. That's the thing, is you have to remove the expectation. I don't give to get either.
But you just said you give, and then you don't give back to them.
But that's the thing, is if it's true, like if you keep giving to people, and there's nothing there ever, eventually, right? Like they're not going to be a part of that village.
Yeah.
Like people, like for me, I that's the one thing. Like I've tried to remove expectation, right? I say try because, you know, it's not an easy thing to do. But I've absolutely tried to remove the key thing there is that expectation of people. And I think that, you know, a lot of that has to do with the boundaries. When you're so, right, I don't care about getting back because I know my cup's going to be full. Because I'm going to take care of myself in the way that I know that I need to. And then there was a lot that was said there. So I want to just, that you said, but I agree, right? We shouldn't give with expectation to receive back. But also, if you are giving, the more you give, the more you are getting, right? Because that's what, you know, people start to see that you care about them. And that's what I've noticed in life is like, the more I give, the like, it just keeps coming back. And like, and, you know, and I'll say this in a lot of my posts on social is that I don't know what I've done to deserve this life. Right. And I'm just going to keep giving because like I keep getting so much and I'm so grateful and so thankful for it.
Yeah.
And the more I get, the more I'm like, shit, I just need to give more.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's the expectation I have when I receive. I'm like, fuck, Like, I'm not worthy of this. Like, I need to continue to give back.
Yeah. I think what I just had a realization as you were talking is like you get from giving, right? But not giving to get. And I think your cup gets drained when you give with the expectation of getting, in a sense, right? Because you're then doing it for, again, either like acknowledgement, approval, or to be the savior or to take care of this person to, and when that exists, right? When you're not just giving to give, when you're just giving to give, you just automatically get filled up, right? You get that. But when you're giving because you feel like you should, or because this person needs it, or all these other reasons, I think that is a point when you start to drain the cup.
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know.
I still think there's an aspect of, like, I need to work out. I know you do too, right? Like, we need to work out, and that's part of filling our cup, right? And if I were to just give, right, and not get my workouts in, I wouldn't have anything to give. I wouldn't have the energy. I wouldn't have the health. I wouldn't have the things, right? So, like, that's where I say, like, you have to be selfish to be selfless. Like, I have to take care of me. That's where I think of, like, that's part of filling my cup.
Yeah. I think this is very esoteric and like picking at details, but again, how do you define giving?
Yeah.
Why does giving mean you can't work out? Like, if you were to only give, why does that mean you can't work out? Why is one mutually exclusive, like over giving mutually exclusive? You know, like, and that's that we've talked about the either or. And I think about, we make so many ideas around like, well, if I'm always doing this, then I can't do that. But can't they all exist?
Well, and I think, so let's reverse that. I think there's a lot of people, so a lot of people use this as an excuse. Is, oh, I got to take care of my kids, so I can't work out.
Yeah.
Oh, I got to take care of my sick parents, and I don't have time to work out. Right? So when you think of that, like, it's this martyrdom, right? Of, let me, and maybe there's an expectation there, maybe not, but there's this martyrdom of, let me destroy myself, let me kill myself in the name of whatever, right? My children, my parents, and then I think we as a whole, right? We come back to this thought of, well, I kill myself doing this and doing that, and I don't have any time for myself, and so I think there's that aspect of it too.
And that's almost where it almost circles back to like the whole and complete and all of that, because if you say like, oh, I can't work out because I'm taking care of my parents. If I went for a workout instead of taking care of my parents in this 1 hour, I wouldn't be a good daughter. I'd be all these things, right? Like I don't know if I'd say insecurity, but right, there's this sense of our separation from our wholeness, that we're filling in our talents and our duties to other people. We're filling it in our jobs and all of that. And we're saying, whereas if you come from that idea of wholeness, it won't matter, right? Like you won't care. You'll go do that workout and take care of your parents. And I think you're spot on in that we use those as excuses, but I think there's this underlying like, well, I'm not going to be good enough, or I'm not a good this or that and the other if I don't do it.
Yeah.
But that's not, you can be that and work out, and you can take care of them. And we don't even try, right? Like so often we just use the excuse and it fills that void of finally, maybe if I fully dedicate myself to my kids, then I'll be whole and complete.
Right.
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 And And it's just that fear and like then the guilt and the shame that goes with it, which then leads us to be like creating boundaries, right? Like it's so intertwined and
and that's where, like, you know, the guilt, like I have a Jewish mother, right? Like, trust me, I know guilt. And I've dealt with that all my life. And now I've gotten to the point in my life where it's not a thing. Like, I don't, like, you're not going to make me feel guilty.
Yeah.
It's very, right? Like, I know my worth. I know, I think you're right. I think it has to do with your whole and completeness and like you knowing that. And right, like you can try to make me feel guilty, but it doesn't work anymore. Right. Cause I know, right. And that's the thing, you know, and I use, right, working out as an example because that's an easy one to talk about is, you know, like I went on vacation to see my sister and family, and, you know, there's all these things that they're wanting to do. And my thought is, okay, yeah, we could do those once I do my workout. Or I'm going to do this for my workout. Like, I will be gone. And, you know, you can try oh, well, you know, that's going to be, you know, an hour plus that you're away. And yeah, it is. And, you know, I think that the biggest thing is people see boundaries as an attack. Right? Like, when they're not comfortable with your wholeness and completeness, they see it as an attack. Right? So, like, I don't even, like, you know, I can't, you're not going to make me feel guilty. So I'm not even going to argue it. Right? It's, you know, my sister didn't do this, but if I say I'm going to the gym and you're going to try to give me a guilt trip about going to the gym, like, it doesn't even become a discussion. It's not a negotiation. It's not a discussion. It's just, okay, you can feel how you feel about me going to the gym, and I'm still going to the gym.
And it doesn't make you a bad brother.
Right.
You know?
Correct.
And
yes,
so when we decide in that split moment, when we decide instead of going to the gym, instead of serving our higher self, because we feel like we have something missing and we need to get the approval outside of ourselves, we say, okay, yeah, I won't go to the gym. I'm going to go do this thing with you because then I'll be a good brother.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And then there's that expectation of, I expect you to tell me that I'm a good brother, and
yeah,
you know, and how awesome of a brother I am, and
yeah, and look at all these things I do for you.
Right.
I made all these sacrifices for you.
The martyrdom. That's the look at me jumping on this grenade for you.
And that's that giving to get.
Yes.
Or giving to fill that what we're missing, right?
Yeah.
But we're not missing anything. We just have to remember.
Yes. And that's the key, is that you have to be whole and complete in yourself and comfortable in knowing, right? And you can't let, and it's hard, right? This isn't something that, especially if you've grown up in a, you know, I'm going to use this word, but right, like maybe it's not necessarily abusive, but right, like let's say you've grown up in that abusive relationship where, you know, people have set your worthiness based on, you know, how you take care of your family. And maybe it's just you. Maybe it's something that you did to yourself because of how your parents were or weren't. You know, so maybe it's an abusive, quote, abusive relationship with yourself. Of, you know, if I don't take care of my kid, or right, like if I go work out, then, like you said, they're not mutually exclusive. You can do both. Go ahead.
Well, and I think here's just so people can kind of get a frame of reference, like, because again, like you said, like abusive. It can be as simple as this. You are the oldest child, so you're an only child. At 3 years old, your parents have another child, and the mom is constantly holding the new baby, all of these things, and you start to see, oh, well, she's not doing that for me. She didn't do anything wrong. She's taking care of a newborn.
Mm-hmm.
But you see it as, oh, I'm not loved anymore.
Right.
And so you can have great parents. You can have but you have this experience, and that is the moment like you get this separation from your wholeness, and then you go and well, what are the things I can do to be loved? You were never not loved.
Yep.
Right. And so
There's
that's
just different needs.
So then you continue to live your life trying to get love. And maybe you do really well in school and your parents are like, oh, great. So then you create that neural pathway. Well, if I perform well, then I'll be loved.
Yeah.
And then that goes into college, and then that goes into work. And so everything is this, I will be loved when, right? And it all started because your mom had another child. Not because she said anything.
Yep.
Not because she did anything wrong, but because she simply had another child and was taking care of it.
Yeah.
And still taking care of you.
Right.
But you aren't the one being held all the time.
And your needs are different.
So,
right? And
it's...
You adjust your worthiness, right? It's about whole and completeness, but also it's like how you see your worth.
And here's the thing, we all experience it. There's no human who's exempt from it. We all have a moment in our life where we get separated from our truth, from the truth of being whole and complete, unconditional love, like all of that. Everyone has that, and that's part of the process. That's part of it, is going through that to then have the realization and come back to it.
Yeah. And sadly, I think a lot of people don't have the realization, right? And again, it goes back to, right? It's no longer we don't have the tools or have access to the tools. It's we're choosing not to use the tools, right? Because we're now in a world where, right? There's the Google, right? Like, like before we started recording, we found Dr. Google helping us out with something, right? Like, it's right. The tools are out there, and the tools are so accessible. We have a damn computer in our hands, right? That has access to worldwide information, and now it's just a matter of. Right? And I'm not saying it's easy, but it's a matter of we're choosing not to use those tools, and that's how we resort to drugs and alcohol, and again we go back to, right, I'm not worthy, and that's why, it's sad that like this becomes a joke, but people who have quote daddy issues, right? Like, oh, like you hear people like joke, oh, they must have daddy issues. Well, maybe they actually do, right? And they just didn't have the tools to deal with it. And I think that, again, it goes back to their worthiness and their whole and completeness, and then they just made the choices to get them where they're at. Maybe.
And you're never there.
Yeah.
And that's, I think the very important part is we're always, because we're humans and we're given the human mind, we are constantly, it gets easier, but we are constantly, I don't know if you'd say working through it, but we're never exempt from it because of the mind. So, it's not like once you get there, I'm good to go.
Right.
My next 40 years, never gonna worry about an unconscious neural pathway or question my worthiness. I mean, like I said, it gets easier, but it's every time you feel, and you're like, it's awareness, and every time you feel that person showing up, like that's why I love to ask, like, who is this that's showing up? And answer the question. Oh, this is the person who, like, wish their dad was home for dinner instead of at work. Okay. Great. Is that who I am? No. Is that who I want to be? No. Okay. So what do I want to do here? What narrative do I want to create? How do I want to move forward? How do I want to act from a place of my higher self?
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I don't have much to add to that. So it's powerful. It's powerful when you. I feel like boundaries are part of that, and it's funny. Like, this is one of those things where we're gonna. I think we're just gonna disagree, but I think we're also saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? Is, you have to have those boundaries. You have to have the ability to say, right, and I think we're now talking about external boundaries where you have to be able to, or internal boundaries where you have to be able to say to yourself, like, that's not who I am. Right? And we've talked about this, I believe, on the show, and I talk about this in my yoga classes often, is that it's the journey, right? Like, you said it, you never arrive. Right? Let's be crystal clear about something. There's only one place you arrive to. And that's your death, right? There's nothing else. You never arrive, right? Because when you think you arrive to that one point, then it's something else that you have to get to, right? And it's this ever moving thing, and that's why those boundaries have to be, expansive and changing and contractive, because at the beginning of the year you were probably like, retreats galore. Right?
No, not with the pandemic. I was like, I'm not, until there's no requirements to do anything, like, I don't want to deal with it.
But my point is, like, right, like, you were like, let's have retreats, let's do workshops, let's fill my calendar, let's be, right, I don't think we ever want to be busy, right, but let's do these things. And now it's, right, like, that was expansive of the boundaries. And then it's like, okay, let me reel this back in. No, nothing until next year. Let me turn in, right? It's winter, right? Right. That plays a big part, right? Seasonalities. I keep hitting my microphone. It's in the way today. It's not working. Not working for me. My microphone is invading my boundary. External boundary. I don't know what the fuck I was saying.
Yeah, and I guess here's, like, with the word or the concept of boundaries, I think it gives us a false sense that we can control things. And so what happens when that boundary gets crossed by yourself or someone else? Like, there's that. Whereas when we can just say, like, I'm serving my highest self. Then when it's crossed, you don't have, that's just what is and what needed to happen versus. So what happens when we do let those boundaries down and then we beat ourselves up, right? So and you said, like, oh, beginning of the year, like, my boundaries were more expansive, or I was just flowing to what was there, right? Like, okay, this is the space I'm at. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this, right? And I think, like, ultimately we can never control. We have no control over anything except for how we react or interact with what's happening. And it's really interesting too, like, in one of my nidras that I guide, there's a line that says, knowing that you've arrived, because so instead of saying we never arrive, what if you switch it to, like, we've already arrived? Because when you've arrived, there's nothing else that you need to do. Like, that's part of the second part. And so it's, again, like, linguistics, but it's just something that allows you to try on. Like, for me, boundaries feels like resistance. It feels like control. It feels like walls. And I don't need to put up any more walls. Like, I need to listen. I need to move with the flow of what's showing up. I need to be present to that, and I, again, we are saying same things, like, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are saying in two different ways how to honor yourself. So it's just something like for yourself, like try it on. I just think boundaries have been such a buzzword lately and something that's talked about all the time. Oh, I'm working on my boundaries. I got to set boundaries. And if that's not working for you, find another way to look at it.
Yeah. Yes. So I want to talk about something that you hit on, because I agree in the sense of, right, we don't want to be putting up walls, and I hear what you're saying. I think you made it a little more clear that, right, we're so quick to put up these boundaries of like we think of boundaries as like stop, no, don't enter, right? And that's not what I see the boundary as.
Yeah.
Right. And I think you're right. I think so many people, it's like, I need boundaries. And it becomes these like, rigid, hard line walls of like, no, that's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And where I think of, again, right, like this aura is my boundary of like this, like moving, this flexibility, this, you know, people can enter from anywhere. And right, as you know, it's almost like a force field, right? Like you could see through it, right? And sometimes, you're going to run into it. It's going to be like a brick wall. Mm-hmm. But then other times you're going to run into it and you get through. But then you brought up this concept of the wall, and I don't know if I've mentioned it on the podcast, but I had like this, I'm really like digging Pixar movies lately, and their messaging, right? There's always these like little messages in Pixar movies, but I think there's even bigger messages that a lot of us don't see in them. And I'll share the one that I think relates right now is with Monsters, Inc. Have you seen Monsters, Inc.?
Yeah, but it's been quite some time.
Okay. So, spoiler alert, Monsters, Inc. Right? I'm just gonna give the quick premise. The quick premise is there's these monsters. They wait for children to go to sleep at night. They come into their bedroom. They scare the crap out of them to get energy, right? And then they get energy, and then they use the energy to power their world. And then at the end of the movie, they befriend a child who isn't scared of them and realize that laughter is actually more powerful of an energy than scaring the kids. So instead of being these big scary monsters, they become these big humorous monsters that want to make kids laugh. Right? Great moral, right? Like,
yeah.
But I think it's even deeper than that. And it made me, when I was talking about a yoga class, and it made me think of this, is, you know, we put up these walls, we put up these boundaries, these no stop, right? And it's because we're scared. It's because we're afraid. It's because we have fear of whatever, right? Maybe it's expectation. Maybe it's of, you know, something of how we are or how we need to be, right? If this person does this, then I need to do this, right? It's also the same. So if like you give, right? Like we have the expectation of giving, right? And I'm going to give and he better give back to me. But then there's also the expectation of, oh, if I receive from someone, now I owe this person.
Yeah.
And that's also not true either.
Yeah, I love that.
Right. So we put up these walls, and the problem with a wall is it's a wall. It doesn't let fear and pain in, but it also doesn't let happiness and joy in, and it doesn't let love in. And in yoga, right, we open, right? Like I'm sitting in a very closed position right now, but in yoga we open. What do? We open our hearts. We open our chests, right? Like, yeah, we definitely move through some of these like more contractive, but right, we do this all day, right? We hunch over keyboards, our phones, we sit on couches, we do this all day, right? The point of yoga is to open. We talk about opening the heart, right? And what do you do when you open? Right? There's nothing there. There's no protection. Right? In winter, we're very closed in the position I was just sitting in. I'm very closed. There's things protecting me. But when there's no walls, there's nothing to protect you.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also, right, like to let love in, you also have to be able to let fear in and pain in.
Mm-hmm.
And what the where I'm getting to, I have a point with the Monsters Inc., is that when you realize how much more powerful love and laughter is,
Mm-hmm.
it's okay to be scared.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to be potentially frightened. Because, right, like, and I think this is the deeper message, and they don't necessarily get into that in Monsters Inc., is that, yeah, you know what? You gotta be open. Yeah, you know what? Right? People are like, how do I trust someone again? You just trust them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, you can't play this game of, oh, I can't trust, Bree because this other person hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So because this other person hurt me, I'm going to put up all these walls and boundaries for Bree.
Mm-hmm.
And all you're doing is hurting yourself, and you're stopping yourself from receiving
Mm-hmm.
love and happiness and, yeah, and pain.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to get hurt. You're going to.
Yeah.
Right? Like, expect that. Right? Right? These are the expectations. I expect that I'm going to get love. I expect that I'm going to get happiness. But I also expect that I'm going to get pain. And again, right? Sometimes it's intentional. I think oftentimes pain isn't. Like, especially when people, are, I think a lot of it's our own made up thing. But I think we have to stop putting up walls.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and I think a wall is very different than a boundary in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
right? And again, we're saying the same things, right? We're disagreeing on some things, but we're also saying the same things.
Mm-hmm.
Is we have to stop putting up walls because we have to be open. We have to be open in order, and what I've noticed in the time that I've been talking about it this year, and the more open I'm being, the more vulnerable I'm being, the more love I'm getting.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's pain. There's been times of pain.
Mm-hmm.
And it hurts, but I don't close because
Mm-hmm.
I know that what heals my pain is love, and I can't let it in if the walls are up.
Yeah.
And people are like, why am I not worthy of being loved? Because you're claiming that you're not worthy of being loved. You're not letting that love in. And wow,
Yeah.
so esoteric, right?
Well,
like, so,
and why you say this, it makes me again think like letting pain in or fear,
mm-hmm.
and also and that's again that remembering, when you remember that you're whole and complete, regardless,
Mm-hmm.
there's no exception. You're already whole and complete.
Yeah.
You can let the pain in. You can let the fear in because you know it doesn't change your wholeness.
Right.
Right. And I've said this on here before, but I love one of my teachers says, what was it? I can't remember the first part. She realized that her power isn't in perfection. Her power lies in the totality of her humanity. And we've discussed this about darkness and light. Light, when I say light, it's the light, all-encompassing light that holds both darkness and light mm-hmm. in the same light, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we no longer seek our worthiness, our wholeness outside of us, we can allow all of it to come in.
Yeah.
We can be with all of
mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's what creates, it's all of it is part of our wholeness.
Yeah. Yeah, we can face the stillness. Did we record the stillness conversation, or was that pre-recording?
No, you said it on here.
Did I?
Yeah, I think that's what you started with.
Yeah. we can embrace the stillness.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly it. Like, it's the stillness where we confront ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And we don't get lots of stillness. We get moments.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, right, if you're like, I don't have any stillness, it's because we actually don't get moments of stillness. We have opportunities to be still.
Yeah.
And it's your decision to discover those opportunities. There's a great, right, I'm not religious. I'm spiritual. I'm not religious. And you can use whatever word, God, the universe, however you want to talk to it. In the movie, so there's Bruce Almighty, and then there's Evan Almighty. I'm really on this movie kick. I love the hidden meanings in movies. But I think it was Evan Almighty. That's the one with Steve Carell where he becomes Noah, I think, right?
I don't know. I've
Have you
never seen it. I never heard of
Okay.
it. I was like, oh,
I'm
there
pretty
it is.
sure. Yeah, so Bruce Almighty, you know that one?
Yeah, with Jim Carrey.
Okay, Jim Carrey,
right?
where
Okay.
he becomes God essentially,
Okay.
and like he gets like this email system, and he gets to grant everyone prayers, and
Okay.
and then there's Evan Almighty, where I believe where he becomes Noah,
Okay.
in Noah's Ark, and like he has to prepare for the Great Flood,
Yeah.
and but in Morgan Freeman is like the true God in these movies.
Yeah.
Quote, true God, right? In these movies. And he says, when a man prays for patience, God doesn't give him patience. God gives him the opportunity to be patient.
Yeah.
And when a man prays for time with his family, he doesn't give the man time with his family. He gives him the opportunity to make time with his family. And so, to me, that hit. Like, again, feel how you want about the word God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can remove, if you're an atheist, fucking take the word God out of there.
Replace it
right?
with life.
Right.
When you ask life for.
When you ask anything, when you want something in life, you're not going to get it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It doesn't just appear. It's not just like, I want this.
Mm-hmm.
And now, boom, here I am, I get this. No, you have the opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to find that. And you have the opportunity for patience. You have the opportunity for time with your family. You have the opportunity to find stillness.
I love that.
Yeah. And yes, yeah, me too. Yeah, right? Like, I want love. You have the opportunity to find love.
Mm-hmm.
And, you have the opportunity to find stillness. That's the thing is, even when you're still in those moments, because they don't last long, right? They don't last long at all. They're actually, right? Like, you got to think, even in those small moments of stillness that we have, everything around us is still moving,
Yeah.
right? The universe is still going. That's why I believe like in magic and the magic of the universe and right. Like imagine if the Earth stood still for a moment, right? If the Earth took a moment of stillness, we'd get thrown off the planet, right? Right? Like if the Earth was just like, you know what, need a minute to myself, right? We would all like it would actually be. It's quite comical, right? You're laughing because like you see us just getting. It's like the kids on the merry-go-round thing. Right?
Yeah.
Like, you're spinning so fast, and then it just stops. We'd all get launched from the planet. Right? Like, it's an opportunity to find stillness. And, that's why a lot of people also have trouble, creating boundaries and dealing with boundaries is because in those boundaries, you find these opportunities, you find the stillness, and then it's a lot of confrontation with yourself. And you're like, oh, fuck. Right? Like, I'll share this because this is what I shared in my yoga class last night is that I used to fill all my time to not have those moments of stillness. So I didn't have to confront myself. Right? So I'm just go, busy. I don't have to, I'm avoiding myself. I'm avoiding, be it my problems or my anxieties, my fears. And then when you get tools like yoga and meditation, and then when you get into things like hunting, you start to realize there's tons of opportunity for stillness. And then you have to be with yourself. And you have to confront yourself, especially like in hunting. There's so much time to yourself in hunting. And you start to question who you are and what you are. And you have to have the tools to deal with that. Because if you don't, right, and that's why meditation can be so difficult for people. And that's why Shavasana is the hardest pose in yoga, right? Because it's this confrontation with yourself. And while it's really easy to set up these external boundaries, that's the other thing, right? We set up these external, fucking microphone, damn it. There's going to be all these thuds on our fucking recording. Right, there's all that, right, that's the thing is, right, like I'm putting my hands up if you're not watching. I'm putting my hands up when I'm saying boundaries and walls. And the issue with that is that we also block what's in from getting out. right? So we don't get to let out the things that we need to let out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the problem with walls, with these hard, rigid boundaries.
Yeah, and I think that's, and this has been a few months really, we talk about unconditional love, and
Mm-hmm.
that it means love without conditions, right?
Yeah.
And that's the boundary thing, is like, that's where I see sometimes boundaries as restrictive to love or whatever it might be without conditions.
Yeah.
And I feel if you, like our heart center, our heart chakra, we're getting hippie here, is between our solar plexus, our third chakra, is really that place of, it's kind of where we start to, of like self-worth and also like confidence. It's how we interact with the outside world.
Mm-hmm.
And then you think about our throat chakra is the voice of authentic self-expression. And it's no surprise that our heart center is in between the two of those.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it passes, if we can allow it to pass through the heart, right? Unconditional love, then how we speak or how we move comes from an authentic place, versus the third chakra of when it's out of balance, that seeking of approval, acknowledgement, appreciation, of all these things to make ourselves whole. And so the heart is where we start to realize and can transmute into unconditional love, versus conditional is what we said earlier. If I do this, then I'll be loved. If you do this, if you do all these things, then I'll love you. And it just got misinterpreted at some point when we were young.
Yeah.
And it's not that there was action, and some people have abusive, like I'm not taking away from that, but
Right.
there is a moment that we see, oh, I'm not whole or I'm not loved, and now I create these conditions. And when I do this, I'll be loved. When you do this, I'll love you. And it's just, that's where that, like, coming back to just letting go of all of that.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. There's a quote that I recently read that I want to share.
Yeah.
That, right, like I feel like is encompassing of everything that we're talking about, and especially you bring up, like, the chakras and being vulnerable, right? Because living from the heart, you do have to be vulnerable. You have to be your authentic self. And I, like, that's been my life goal, is to be vulnerable, right? Because in that vulnerability is where you start to connect with people. And I'm reading Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. A great book if you haven't cracked into it yet. But there's a quote by Neil Gaiman, and he says, "The moment that you feel that just possibly you're walking down the street naked, exposing too much of your heart and your mind and what exists on the inside, showing too much of yourself, that's the moment you may be starting to get it right." And yeah, that just, I feel like it hits on everything we've already talked about. So powerful.
Yeah.
It's a great chat.
Yeah.
How long have we been going?
A little breath, a little journal.
Yeah, a little journal, a little breath.
A little journal, a little breath. Okay. Yeah.
Little journal, yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
End on a good note with the breath. And Abby, if you're listening, do the damn breath work.
Oh, does she skip it?
It's not just Abby. It's funny. Abby is one of my friends and a listener. Right? Shout out to Abby. She's a guest on the podcast. She's an avid listener. And one of the episodes, the recent episodes, I said, if you're fast forwarding, you've already learned the format. Like, everyone knows the format of a Joe Rogan episode.
Yeah.
Like, they know how much of the episode to skip into to get past the commercials.
Yeah.
Right, like, if you know the format of our episodes, right, and it's actually been changing a bit, but there's going to be breath work, there's going to be a journal prompt. if you're doing that and you're skipping that, why are you skipping it?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Well, my friend did say he stopped listening to it because he was cleaning the house. And he's like, you started going into breath work and I'm cleaning the house and I couldn't do it. So I just turned it off.
right. But why?
Yeah.
Right? Like, you can't, you're doing housework. I get it.
Yeah.
Totally understand. Absolutely. Keep doing your housework, but stop just for a moment
Yeah.
and breathe.
Yeah.
And you're listening, and right, like, again, I didn't say, right, we said this in the very first episode, is like, I don't need you to pull out your diary and put hearts and names next to it, right? That's not what this journal thing is. It's, if you're listening, I'm assuming your thoughts are going. I'm assuming your mind's working.
Mm-hmm.
Write something down, right? Write your thoughts down.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to share them with us, or maybe you do, right? But what are your thoughts? Why are you skipping the breath?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we all need to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Even if you're driving, right? Bree says, like, yeah, close down the eyes, right? And she says, if you're driving, don't close down the eyes. But you still need to breathe.
Yeah. You still are breathing.
Yeah, you still are breathing.
You're already doing it.
Right. Right. You're doing housework. You're breathing. And that's cool. Like, and I'm just calling Abby out because in the episode I said, like, why are you skipping it? And now I'm saying it again. And it was funny. I saw her in person and she was like, oh, you totally called me out. Like, I didn't know she was skipping it. Right. And she's like, you totally called me out. She called herself out.
Yeah.
Right. She's like, I was totally, fast forward through the breath work. And that's cool. Like, if that's what you want to do, great.
Yeah.
Do that. Right. Like, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, but I do care. Mm-hmm. Right. Like, that's where I know I'm whole and complete. I don't have the expectation that you're going to do this. Right.
Yeah.
But we are providing this, right? We wanted something different. We wanted it to be interactive, and the power of our breath is just that it's really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And so be it if you're cleaning the house, or you have 2 crazy children to take care of, or you're driving, or whatever it is. Just take this moment. Mm-hmm. Maybe you don't do the whole breath, right? Just take this moment to big inhale through the nose.
Mm-hmm.
Big exhale out the mouth. Be mindful of that one breath.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's just a note, right? Maybe it's you send a text message. Maybe it's not, right? So here's the journal prompt. Maybe it's not a journal, right? Maybe it's just a thought that you write down. Maybe it's a thought that you send to a friend, to your spouse, to your significant other. Maybe you something we said made you think of a person you haven't talked to in a really long time, and you reach out to them, right? Just allow these opportunities, this journal opportunity, right, to give you the opportunity, right? What is there? Mm-hmm. What are you finding in that moment of stillness? And what can you get out of it? Or what can you give out of it, right? No expectations. It's not about... Right, I'll reach out to my yoga students via email. Hey, thinking about it. I'm not expecting a response back. I'm not expecting, oh, wow, you're amazing. No one reaches out to me, right? Like, that's not it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I'm reaching out to you because I care. And maybe that's what you get from listening to our episode. Or maybe it's remember to breathe. Maybe it's a remember to take one mindful breath every day. Again, right, like you can be full blown into our journal prompts and our breath work, which is great, or you can not, which is also great, or you can be somewhere in the middle. Mm-hmm. And maybe you write it down. Maybe you don't. Maybe you have some thoughts. Maybe your thoughts are, I say this in my yoga class, like half-heartedly joking. Maybe your thoughts are, wow, that was stupid. Mm-hmm. Right? You're not going to agree with everything that we say. Again, this is from our experience, from our life. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't share in my yoga class. I don't share on here. It's not about the hunting. It's not about the things that I do. It's giving you a point of relation of what I do and like how I feel in those things. And there's oftentimes a lot of those same feelings in the things that you do. So use that. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, now we know anyone who doesn't do the breath work is going to stop playing right now. We made it too easy putting it at the end.
Well.
There's not even an opportunity there. It's just off. It's gone. They press
here's
stop.
the thing. Here's the thing. It's you have the opportunity right now to breathe, or you have the opportunity. We're going to make it easy for them.
Yeah.
Here's your opportunity to press stop.
Yeah.
If you know what, you're going to skip the breath work. Here it is. Hit stop right now.
And then ask yourself, who is that?
Right, yeah.
Who is that turning on?
Right. Like you're pressing stop because we're telling you to breathe. That ain't my problem.
No, but you know what? The other part is it's very fascinating because in one of my modules for yoga therapy, we're talking about like we'll give quote unquote homework assignments to our clients, right? And you want to be like, okay, just sit and be mindful about your breath for 5 minutes. And we're like, for some people, 5 minutes is a really long time. How about 3 breaths? And that's, and I think about that here is like sometimes they are longer. Sometimes the breath work is 5 minutes. And that feels like forever for some people. Mm-hmm. And I think what you said is perfectly, like, is great. Like, if we start going to the breath work, you don't want to do it, you want to skip through it, great. But take 3 mindful breaths, right? Like, do something, right? Do your own breath work. Just give yourself that moment. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so that was, it's like all, and maybe challenge yourself, right? Are you creating a boundary? Both sides of the boundaries, right? But it's 3 breaths can be hard for someone, and and that's okay. Yep.
We should totally on our next episode like start it with like laughter and make like something up about how something we talked about at the end of this episode for the people who hit stop and didn't get to hear it.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you totally missed the end of that episode.
Oh, it wasn't over.
Yeah.
It kept going.
We told you to hit stop and now there's, we totally talked for another 20 minutes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that'd be great. All right, so don't close your eyes. I don't know. I don't care. Close your eyes. Don't close your eyes. Soften your gaze. Whatever you want. Okay? You're going to breathe anyway. So whatever you choose, if you are doing something, you can still bring awareness to the breath. So just notice your natural breath. Not needing to change it. Just observing where it's at right now. And then begin to notice at the bottom of your exhale where the breath terminates. And as you notice that brief pause between the exhale and inhale, see if you can feel that brief moment of stillness. And at the top of your next inhale, take a pause and bring awareness to your heart center. And then exhaling when prompted by the inner wisdom. So feeling the pause at the top and the natural pause at the bottom. And realizing we have opportunities for stillness all around us at any moment. just returning to your natural breath. Let's take a deep inhale and a big exhale. And from here, you can flutter your eyes open.
We are in such alignment. That was how I started and ended my yoga class yesterday in talking about stillness.
Yeah.
Right, the opportunities of stillness are all around us.
Yeah.
And mostly they reside in us.
Yeah.
And it's in something we do.
Well, I think
constantly.
It's what you said in this episode, like inspired moving into that, right? Is you said for anything, right? The opportunities are around us. They're not given, they're around us. We have to choose them.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye, everyone.
If you want to follow us and our adventures, you can find both of us on Instagram. I'm at Bree Allison. That's BreAllison.
And I am at The Life of Alan Tatone, _ between each word. To check out our offerings, yoga, one-on-one trainings, workshops, retreats, and a recorded library, you can find the info on our website, thehunterandthehippie.com.
If you have questions for the podcast, about the podcast, feedback, suggestions, or just want to say hi or find ways to work with us, our email is thehunterandthehippiepodcast@gmail.com. And don't worry, all of this will be in our show notes.
Thanks for tuning in
Hopefully you weren't tuned out.
to the Hunter and the Hippie podcast.